and I was born at the same moment as the sun. I felt awkward and blundering. Don't linger like this. Now go. Over all that? Asked the little prince. Over all that, the king answered. Feel awkward, 어색하다, 서먹하다. Blundering, 서투른. Overtake, 추월하다. Hand in hand, 서로 손을 잡고. Petal, 꽃잎. Take up room, 장소를 차지하다. Sprout, 새싹, 싹이 나다. Baobab, 바오밥. Shrub, 관목. Appearance, 출현, 외모. Miraculous, 기적적인. Apparition, 유령. With the greatest care, 세심하게. Radiance, 빛. Coquettish, 교태를 부린. Adornment, 장식. Painstaking, 공들인. Disarrange, 어지럽히다. Restrain, 제한하다. Admiration, 감탄, 존경. I did not know what to say to him. I felt awkward and blundering. I did not know how I could reach him, where I could overtake him and go on hand in hand with him once more. It is such a secret place, the land of tears. I soon learned to know this flower better. On the little prince's planet, the flowers had always been very simple. They had only one ring of petals. They took up no room at all. They were a trouble to nobody. One morning, they would appear in the grass, and by night, they would have faded peacefully away. But one day, from a seed blown from no one knew where, a new flower had come up, and the little prince had watched very closely over this small sprout, which was not like any other small sprouts on his planet. It might, you see, have been a new kind of baobab. The shrub soon stopped growing, and began to get ready to produce a flower. The little prince, who was present at the first appearance of a huge bud, felt at once that some sort of miraculous apparition must emerge from it. But the flower was not satisfied to complete the preparations for her beauty in the shelter of her green chamber. She chose her colors with the greatest care. She adjusted her petals one by one. She did not wish to go out into the world all rumpled like the field poppies. It was only in the full radiance of her beauty that she wished to appear. Oh yes, she was a coquettish creature, and her mysterious adornment lasted for days and days. Then one morning, exactly at sunrise, she suddenly showed herself. And after working with all this painstaking precision, she yawned and said, "Ah, I am scarcely awake. I beg that you will excuse me. My petals are still all disarranged." But the little prince could not restrain his admiration. "Oh, how beautiful you are!" "Am I not?" the flower responded sweetly. "And I was born at the same moment as the sun." The little prince could easily guess enough that she was not any too modest, but how moving and exciting she was. "I think it is time for breakfast," she added an instant later. "If you would have the kindness to think of my needs." And the little prince, completely abashed, went to look for a sprinkling can of fresh water. So he tended the flower. She began very quickly to torment him with her vanity, which was, if the truth be known, a little difficult to deal with. One day, for instance, when she was speaking of her 4 thorns, she said to the little prince, Let the tigers come with their claws. There are no tigers on my planet, the little prince objected. And anyway, tigers do not eat weeds. Weed, 잡초. Draft, 찬바람 초안. Screen, 가림막. Remark, 언급하다 발언하다. Glass globe, 유리돔. Interrupt, 방해하다. On the verge of, 뭐뭐의 직전에. Naive, 순진한. Remorse, 양심의 가책. Inseparable, 분리할 수 없는. Confide, 비밀을 털어놓다. Breathe, 호흡하다. Fragrance, 향기, 향수. Disturb, 방해하다. Stratagem, 술책. Inconsistent, 일관성 없는. Take advantage of, 뭐뭐를 이용하다. Migration, 이주. Chimney, 굴뚝. Dejection, 낙담. I am not a weed, the flower replied sweetly. Please excuse me. I am not at all afraid of tigers, she went on, but I have a horror of drafts. I suppose you wouldn't have a screen for me? A horror of drafts? That is bad luck for a plant, remarked the little prince and added to himself. This flower is a very complex creature. At night, I want you to put me under a glass globe. It is very cold where you live, in the place I came from. But she interrupted herself at that point. She had come in the form of a seed. She could not have known anything of any other worlds. Embarrassed over having let herself be caught on the verge of such an untruth, she coughed 2 or 3 times in order to put the little prince in the wrong. The screen? I was just going to look for it when you spoke to me. Then she forced her cough a little more, so that he should suffer from remorse just the same. So, the little prince, in spite of all the goodwill that was inseparable from his love, had soon come to doubt her. He had taken seriously words which were without importance, and it made him very unhappy. I ought not to have listened to her, he confided to me one day. One never ought to listen to the flowers. One should simply look at them and breathe their fragrance. Mine perfumed all my planet, but I did not know how to take pleasure in all her grace. This tail of claws, which disturbed me so much, should only have filled my heart with tenderness and pity. And he continued his confidences. The fact is that I did not know how to understand anything. I ought to have judged by deeds and not by words. She cast her fragrance and her radiance over me. I ought never to have run away from her. I ought to have guessed all the affection that lay behind her poor little stratagems. Flowers are so inconsistent, but I was too young to know how to love her. I believe that for his escape, he took advantage of the migration of a flock of wild birds. On the morning of his departure, he put his planet in perfect order. He carefully cleaned out his volcanoes. He possessed 2 active volcanoes, and they were very convenient for heating his breakfast in the morning. He also had 1 volcano that was extinct, but as he said, one never knows. So, he cleaned out the extinct volcano too. If they are well cleaned out, volcanoes burn slowly and steadily without any eruptions. Volcanic eruptions are like fires in a chimney. On our Earth, we are obviously much too small to clean out our volcanoes. That is why they bring no end of trouble upon us. The little prince also pulled up, with a certain sense of dejection, the last little shoots of the baobabs. He believed that he would never want to return. But on this last morning, all these familiar tasks seemed very precious to him. And when he watered the flower for the last time and prepared to place her under the shelter of her glass globe, he realized that he was very close to tears. Goodbye, he said to the flower, but she made no answer. Goodbye, he said again. The flower coughed, but it was not because she had a cold. Forgiveness, 용서. Absence, 없음, 결석. Reproach, 비난, 비난하다. Bewilder, 어리둥절하게 만들다. Arrest, 체포하다. Fault, 잘못. Endure, 견디다. Presence, 있음, 존재. Caterpillar, 애벌레. Become acquainted, 친숙해지다. Linger, 더 오래 머물다. Asteroid, 소행성. Inhabit, 살다. Ermine, 왕들의 가운. Majestic, 장엄한. Recognize, 알아보다. Approach, 접근하다. Consumingly, 열렬하게. Contrary to, 뭐뭐와 반대로. Monarch, 군주. I have been silly, she said to him at last. I ask your forgiveness. Try to be happy. He was surprised by this absence of reproaches. He stood there all bewildered, the glass globe held arrested in mid-air. He did not understand this quiet sweetness. Of course I love you, the flower said to him. It is my fault that you have not known it all the while. That is of no importance, but you have been just as foolish as I. Try to be happy. Let the glass globe be. I don't want it anymore. But the wind... My cold is not so bad as all that. The cool night air will do me good. I am a flower. But the animals... Well, I must endure the presence of 2 or 3 caterpillars if I wish to become acquainted with the butterflies. It seems that they are very beautiful. And if not the butterflies and the caterpillars, who will call upon me? You'll be far away. As for the large animals, I am not at all afraid of any of them. I have my claws. And naively, she showed her 4 horns. Then she added, Don't linger like this. You have decided to go away. Now go. For she did not want him to see her crying. She was such a proud flower. He found himself in the neighborhood of the asteroids 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, and 330. He began, therefore, by visiting them, in order to add to his knowledge. The first of them was inhabited by a king. Clad in royal purple and ermine, he was seated upon a throne, which was at the same time both simple and majestic. Ah, here is a subject, exclaimed the king, when he saw the little prince coming. And the little prince asked himself, how could he recognize me when he had never seen me before? He did not know how the world is simplified for kings. To them all men are subjects. Approach, so that I may see you better, said the king, who felt consumingly proud of being at last a king over somebody. The little prince looked everywhere to find a place to sit down, but the entire planet was crammed and obstructed by the king's magnificent ermine robe. So he remained standing upright, and since he was tired, he yawned. It is contrary to etiquette to yawn in the presence of a king, the monarch said to him. I forbid you to do so. I can't help it. I can't stop myself, replied the little prince, sorely embarrassed. I have come on a long journey, and I have had no sleep. Ah, then, the king said, I order you to yawn. It is years since I have seen anyone yawning. Yawns, to me, are objects of curiosity. Come now, yawn again. It is an order. That frightens me. I cannot anymore, murmured the little prince, now completely abashed. Replied the king. Then I order you sometimes to yawn and sometimes to... He sputtered a little and seemed vexed. For what the king fundamentally insisted upon was that his authority should be respected. He tolerated no disobedience. He was an absolute monarch, but because he was a very good man, he made his orders reasonable. General, 장군 일반적인. Timid, 소심한. Inquiry, 질문 문의. Order, 명령하다 주문하다. Wonder, 궁금해하다. Rule, 지배하다. Sire, 폐하. Hasten, 재촉하다. Assure, 안심시키다. Simplicity, 간단함. Gesture, 몸짓. Absolute, 절대적인 완전한. Universal, 일반적인 보편적인. Obey, 복종하다. Instantly, 즉시. Permit, 허락하다. Insubordination, 불복종 반항. Authority, 권위. Pluck, 용기, 결단. Ask a favor, 부탁하다. If I ordered a general, he would say by way of example, if I ordered a general to change himself into a seabird, and if the general did not obey me, that would not be the fault of the general, it would be my fault. May I sit down? Came now a timid inquiry from the little prince. I order you to do so. The king answered him and majestically gathered in a fold of his ermine mantle. But the little prince was wondering. The planet was tiny. Over what could this king really rule? Sire, he said to him, I beg that you will excuse my asking you a question. I order you to ask me a question. The king hastened to assure him. Sire, over what do you rule? Over everything, said the king with magnificent simplicity. Over everything? The king made a gesture which took in his planet, the other planets, and all the stars. Over all that? Asked the little prince. Over all that, the king answered, for his rule was not only absolute, it was also universal. And the stars obey you? Certainly they do, the king said. They obey instantly. I do not permit insubordination. Such power was a thing for the little prince to marvel at. If he had been master of such complete authority, he would have been able to watch the sunset not 44 times in one day, but 72, or even 100, or even 200 times without ever having to move his chair. And because he felt a bit sad as he remembered his little planet which he had forsaken, he plucked up his courage to ask the king a favor. I should like to see a sunset. Do me that kindness. Order the sun to set.